Gerina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm super hyped. Before all the resume and all these identifier codes and codes, can you please describe who you are and what is the fun fact that people don't really know about you?
Okay, who am I? I don't know. So there's a Monet song called "I Like That," and so in that song, she basically talks about how she's these contradicting things. So she calls herself, "I'm a walking contradiction. I guess I'm factual and fiction, a little crazy, a little sexy, a little cool." So I would say that's me. I think I am a walking contradiction. There are things about me, and that's who I am. But I'm also this other things. There's a lot of like childlike hope for me, but then also, I guess, being a Black person in America, there's also some cynicism. So it's like, how is she so hopeful and loving? And then on this other end, she's just really cynical about life. But I'm both of those things. And I hold both of them in tension because that is the duality of my consciousness. And I mean, that's something that literary geniuses, I would call them, would talk about, like the double consciousness of Black folks. And I definitely would say I'm that. I would say triple consciousness. Like I'm American, I'm a Black woman, and I'm a Christian. I identify as Christian. So a lot of how do I intersect those things where I strike up a good balance? Let me see. That's all I have. What was another question?
What is the one fun fact that nobody really knows about you?
I don't know if nobody, but I know people in my close circle may know this. But so sometimes I perform like musicals or like a television series in my room. Like I would literally just start and I would create a whole scene in my room. I have like, I know who I'm talking to, I know where we are, and it's like a whole entire scene. So if you were to listen in, you would be like, who is she talking to? And why are they having so much fun? And it's just me in my room. And because I was raised as the only child, so my imagination is like wild and vibrant. So that's a fun fact about me. That I create stories in my rooms. Like I'm still a little girl.
Are you playing multiple roles?
So I play myself, so it's like an ongoing monologue, but I see the different characters, like, and I don't like literally see them, but I can imagine like, oh, I'm talking to Tom over here, and then I'm also talking to this person over here, and this is what we're talking about. And then like, and let's say I'm getting ready, I'll like look at them, and, like I'll look in that area. I'm like, I don't know, it's like it's so funny. It's like literally acting out a whole scene while I get ready.
I love that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really funny
It's
and
really
embarrassing now that I think about it.
No, it's such a lovely thing, and you get to express yourself, right? And that's something that's really missing, like the lack of better word. Like a lot of people don't know how to express themselves.
That's very true. I think I try to do the best I can at expression because I understand how important that is. And I would say my parents did a good job. I'm sorry for the sound, but my parents did a really great job at allowing me to express myself. I also was into theater, when I was younger, and then I went to school performing arts, and so that definitely took it to the next level. And so I've always had some level of performance, public speaking, where I was always able to express myself. And the times that I'm not able to express myself, I become very like depressed, and I don't feel aligned. So like I think expression is very important for everyone.
Do you feel stuck when you don't express yourself?
hmm Especially creatively. If I am not doing anything creative, I feel it's like, how do I describe it? It's like the little girl in me starts to suffocate. And so then the darkness of the world starts to seep in. But when I create, it allows to keep that darkness at bay as much as possible so that little girl can still be hopeful and vibrant and be able to create these worlds for herself. And so yeah, if I don't create, it's not a good place to be in. I get easily depleted. Yeah.
I could totally relate to that. What are your creative outlets? Like, what do your creativity looks like?
So I dibble and dabble in spoken word. And then I would randomly go to a spoken word cafe. So I did the hang night, a virtual hang night, where I shared one of my pieces that I haven't done yet. And just being in that space was really great, hearing other people's work and my work. And so that's one form. I have a show that I call Wounded Not Broken, and I only do it once a year actually. So I do it once a year, but then I also was doing an open mic night once a month with my partner Carolyn. She's my coworker, and so we do co-producing together. And then like those open mics, which are called Real Talk, allows for people to come together and kind of have this discussion dialogues of expressing themselves based off of a particular theme. And so as I allow myself to host or produce or write or even, I don't know, just come up with innovative ideas. That's the way that I have my outlets. I haven't danced in a while. I miss that. I do miss that. I can't wait till I'm able to like dance again. But that used to be an outlet of mine too, just dancing. Like I would call it interpretive theatrical movement, and that's very cathartic for me. Even when it comes to like emotional stuff, and I can't cry and let it out. If I dance to a certain song, I'm then able to emote in the way that I need to.
Definitely music has such an impact on my life as well. So I'm glad to hear like you are also doing your music and your body and fully allowing yourself to express when you're in that space. So let's talk about Wounded But Not Broken and Real Talk. Can you
Yes, I can. So Wounded Not Broken actually came from an experience that I had in a program called Momentum. And in that experience, I danced to the song Flaws and All. And dancing to Flaws and All, I didn't, it was so weird because I just magically had on spandex shorts underneath my big pants. Like but I didn't know I was going to do it. And so it was just such a beautiful experience of dancing to being loved by someone, flaws and all, especially because that was something that I was dealing with of who can love my wounded parts and these painful, ugly sides of me. And so while I was dancing, people in the room, they said that they started like people were crying and moved to tears, and they were like, "What, girl? Like, what is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." And so with that, I started using the phrase like, "I don't believe that I'm broken. I believe that I'm wounded." And so then I started saying "wounded, not broken." And so with that, I did. I think I was invited to Baltimore, and I danced there as well. And then I started working on my own show where I was like, how can I take my background in therapy, my love and background in the arts, and put it together in a way where I can create a therapeutic and theatrical experience for both the artist and the audience where they can actually work through some things. And so the first Wounded Not Broken was about the journey of self-love and acceptance. And I thought that was really well attended, and it seemed like it impacted a lot of people well. And the second one was about being lost and found, about losing your identity because of the different systems of oppression. And then there was what was the other one? Oh, it was the relationships, healthy and unhealthy relationships. So that was 2017, 2018, 2019. 2020, I don't know what that's going to look like because of COVID. But yeah, so that's Wounded Not Broken, taking therapy and the arts and creating an environment for that. Real Talk, so my co-producer who was doing Wounded Not Broken with me, she was like, well, we need to do something more often. We need to do something monthly. How about we do an open mic that's topical, similar to Wounded Not Broken, and we do this once a month? And I was like, oh, cool. All right. So she was like, I want to call it Real Talk. And I was like, great. So her and I are the hosts of that. And so what we do is we usually have like 3 people that we already know is going to perform. We kind of have our questions and answers. And so it's like a talk back with the audience. We're playful. We create a safe space. And then like people will do their pieces based off of the theme or not. It all depends. And so that's Real Talk and Wounded Not Broken.
what are the demographic who attend in your event?
So with Real Talk, we found that we had a lot of youth, a lot of adolescents. That's within our program, they would come out. And so a lot of our coworkers is what they support us, and they're also artists. So they'll bring like their youth with them. And then I know the last one that we had before COVID broke out, I think we called it Black Love. I think it was in February. And it was a whole bunch of youth there and people in their 30s. And that was a great event. It was vibrant. It was beautiful. Usually we have like young people from ages, we'll have 18 to about 40 would be the age range of people that would come to Real Talk. Wounded Not Broken is a little older. I would say it would start from like mid 20s to about 50, 60s. And that's the range of people that come to Wounded Not Broken.
Wow, they're really vast in both end.
They are. Also, a lot of them are people from my mom's church who knew me when I was younger. So they like come out and invite people to take part of it. So that's the older crowd. They make up a good amount of that.
I love that. That is so sweet. And also, not only it's sweet that they want to support you, but how amazing is that they get to experience that and they're willing to have that journey.
Yes, and one thing that I do love is because they understand. I was like, I'm my space is open to all types of artists. So you'll hear stuff coming out of their mouths that you would never want to hear in the church house, but you all should be okay with that because this space is open, right? And so I was like, there's a lot of different types of people, and I want them to feel safe and welcome here. And I love the fact that they're still willing to come and support that because love is love is love. I love that their love for me and the love for what I'm doing is being supported, and they're also supporting those people as well that they typically may not interface with. And so I think that's cool as well. And even if they don't talk, they're sharing the energetic space of one another.
Absolutely. I love that you are approaching this with the background in therapy as well. And so, before we jump into the therapy part of the question, I want to ask you, by you operating both Wounded but No Broken and Real Talk, how has that impacted you and your own healing journey?
Whew. Wounded Not Broken is more so that comes from my heart. Real Talk is more of my co-hosting producer side. So I produced like, okay, this is a good idea for Real Talk. It's going to be a lot of fun and it may be healing as well. These are the things that we can say. This is what it's going to look like. But that's more of just me loving people and like hosting and being like, y'all out there. Like I love the energy, the back and forth. I think that's great. Wounded Not Broken usually always comes from spaces of things that I have gone through, things that I'm in, and kind of sorting that out. So even with Lost and Found, I did a monologue from the Colored Museum. I modified it for it to be more modern. It was just talking about air stewardess who was, yeah, she was the airline host for a slave Atlantic transatlantic trade, but it was on an airplane. And so it's a lot of satire. And so what I did, I was like, I know that this can be sometimes very abstract to those who are not really familiar with this level of work and monologues. So I created a multimedia presentation behind me and I pre-recorded myself. So I pre-recorded myself reading this monologue. And then on top of that, I had certain images to go with the words that I was saying. While on stage, you just see my mouth moving and I'm miming. And so I'm talking to the audience as if they are on this plane with me. And that's how I started the show. So I didn't start the show by saying, hey, welcome to Wounded Not Broken. I started the show with that monologue. Like, all right, everyone, buckle your seats. We're like, I mean, buckle your chains. So you're gonna fasten this one, you're gonna fasten that one. And everyone's like, whoa, this is what is she doing? And so I was like, I was like, all right, so when we get up there, there's not gonna be any drums. Can you all say no drums? And I was like, I can't hear you. And so it's very like fake smiles because sometimes in America, a lot of Black people have to put on a smile just to push through the day, but inside they're really hurting. So doing that piece was very cathartic for me to show like I'm gonna smile and be really extra about these really painful things because this is, and it's like now I get to do that on stage and it has the impact that it needs to have, and that feels good. And then I also danced to Four Women by Nina Simone and embodying these different types of Black women and the things that they go through and represent. And I felt connected to kind of each of one of them in a way or empathetic to a character. So that allowed for me to express those different aspects of me. And so that provides my healing. And then it's my spoken word pieces. Just me saying these words has been very helpful for me. So yeah, Wounded Not Broken is definitely very therapeutic for me. And I think that's why I do it once a year because it takes a lot out of me energetically to even compose the show, even though there's other artists putting their work into it. But it's like, how do I put your work into it in a way where it's like this seamless story? So I'm taking all these different arts and I'm putting them in strategic places with scripts to connect them so I can take my audience on this therapeutic journey. And that takes a lot out of me.
I can totally imagine it takes a lot out of you. So let's talk about the mental wellness because I am aware that you are a huge advocate for mental wellness.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And so, you being a therapist, what inspired you to taking this mental wellness advocate journey? Was there any particular incident that, or it was a gradual thing? You're transitioning from art. What was it like for you?
I would say that that aspect was always in me in the sense of being like a problem solver and being able to hear things that other people weren't hearing. The only difference is I was very blunt as an adolescent. I was very loving, but loving for me was I'm going to tell you the truth because we all get to grow. And so I was very blunt. And so that like hurt people's feelings, but they always appreciated it at the end. When I finally decided to then go into therapy officially after undergrad, it was I went through a depressive time, very depressed because I felt like what was my purpose? I felt like I wasn't fulfilling it because I was working at a restaurant in the Upper West Side as a maitre d, and I was working on a reality show as a casting person. So I was doing really well in the casting world, and a lot of people were interested in me and they loved my work ethic. But one thing someone said to me, which was a joke, but it really bothered me, they was like, you're really great at what you do, Gerina. You would be even better and go much further if you sell your soul. Because they felt I had too much integrity. I guess the talent, we call them talent, but the contestants, a lot of them would come to my hotel. So they put me up in a hotel where I would be with on the same floor with the contestants. And so the contestants would really confide in me about a lot of stuff that they were going through. Naturally, being in that space and being able to anchor them back to reality, since the reality world is so fake and sometimes very toxic, was just it came natural to me. And people kept saying like, Gerina's like our therapist, like Gerina's like my counselor. And they like something they kept saying. And even my boss, my manager would come and talk to me about very deep stuff. And he was like, Gerina, I always look forward to working with you because you're like my therapist. I can just tell you things and you kind of help me out. And I was like, there's a theme here. What contributes to the dysfunction of a community? And I said, well, what makes up a community? Families and people. What makes up family and people? Couples. What makes up couples? Individuals. And I was like, where can I go to study this level of therapy where I look at people from a holistic, systemic lens? And that's when I found marriage and family therapy, where they look at people as being a part of a system. So even if I'm doing therapy with one person, I understand that that one person is a representative of their environment and the way they grew up, their culture, their ethnicity. They are just a byproduct of all of these different experiences. And then when I work with couples, having couples understand that too, that when you say this and you do this comes from that. But this person doesn't come from that. So you have different attachment styles. You have different ways of interacting, different expectations. We need to bring that to the table. We need to heal, and then we can collectively heal as a couple. And then the same when you create your family, you're not passing on those like unhealthy patterns, that dysfunctional function. You can start to break those patterns because now you're working with your partner to then create that. And the healthier families that we have, the healthier our communities, and the healthier our communities, that continues to spread. So that's how I kind of got into that, and that's been like my philosophy.
That is a very powerful experience. Like, people already saw you as the person who can hold space for people, and you just dove into it. I love it. So, when we're recording this in June of 2020, where all this COVID-19 pandemic is happening, another rise of the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter is happening, and the conversation about mental wellness came so much more to surface. How would you like to approach the folks who are relatively new to the world of mental wellness, taking care of themselves, or even therapy?
So there's always this saying that black people and mental health, not big fans of it. And a thought just came to me, and I was like, because I'm one of those people who would say that. And then a thought came to me, and I was like, I don't think that us as a community is against healing. I think it's the westernized look of it that makes us very nervous of sitting with one person and kind of talking and going through those things. It used to be church for the black community. That has changed drastically within the last 30 to 40 years, where that's no longer the case. There's been a lot of like indigenous practices as well. One thing that I say is, as a person of color, as a person that was also influenced by my dad, who's very much entrenched in African culture and practices, that's a part of who I am. And so I bring that in the room with me. I'm not in there to try to diagnose you so I can drug you up. I'm in there to actually walk alongside of you as a community member. As in, I have these tools that I learned from this place that I went to, and you have the experience of your life because it's your life. So, what does it look like for you to come into this space with me with these tools, and we can kind of work on how do we collaborate to kind of align the things that you want to align, to kind of produce the results that you want to produce collectively? Because I always believe that people have the answers for themselves, they just need to discover it. I'm a very challenging therapist, though. If you were to speak to my clients, they won't say like, I'm not all like, oh no, not at all. I definitely challenge people to really look within to kind of really work through those soul wounds. Like there's like wounds on top of wounds on top of wounds. And I think it's important as people of color, we have so much complex trauma that it's almost been normalized for us, right? That the resurgence of the civil rights movement came from a video of someone having their neck pressed by an officer's knee. I mean, before that happened, I was like, people were still getting shot by officers. People were still being shot by each other. People were still like, these things were still happening. It's just these uprisings when it happens in such a way that kind of shocks us back to like the reality of we are still living in times that are trying to oppress us. And if we don't talk about it, it's going to continue to plague us. And we're going to start to become bitter. We're going to start to feel it physically. We're going to continue having these ailments. I don't think a lot of Black ailments only come from eating poorly. I think it also comes from all the energy that we store up from all of this negativity that's aimed at us and the things that we live in, the things that we dwell with. And so it's important to have someone to talk to so that you can kind of process that so you're not holding that within you. And so that's what I would tell someone like, don't think of it as something scary. Think of it as a time for you to just process with somebody.
I like that. Some time for you to process something.
Mm-hmm.
That it's so much more approachable than, okay, let's go fix our problem, right? It's almost feel like there's something wrong with you. Or
Right. And therapists aren't genies. We're not genies. And we are not know-it-alls. And I think sometimes it's dangerous when therapists like when their clients are dependent on them. My goal for my clients is to never come back. Like I'm not trying to take all your money. I want you to genuinely be well. And so if I don't have to see you again because you're genuinely okay, that's fine. Come in for a checkup once a month if you need to. But otherwise, I'm not here just to enable or to baby. I want you all to, yeah, have control over your lives, have control over yourselves, and move forward as healthy people. Absolutely.
I love that. And I bet your client who are really being pushed by you to dive into this deeper healing work, I'm pretty sure they really appreciate that about you.
Sometimes, but not during.
I bet they're like, why during the session? But
Yeah.
that's where the real work comes in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that. So, with all the work you're doing, both with your creative work and therapeutic practice, and how do you take care of yourself?
That's a great question. And so I believe in transparency. And so the last 2 weeks was really low for me, like really low. I had to like disconnect from everything. I didn't want to talk to people. People were calling me. I was ignoring their phone calls. My phone battery died. I put it on the charger, didn't even try to turn back on my phone because I realized that I was holding space for so many people within my job because I have a job and then I have another thing that I do so and then I have another thing that I do so in all these different spaces I'm holding spaces for people and I just felt so depleted because I wasn't taking care of myself appropriately. Yeah, I needed that day of rest. And so I took a full day of rest. I'm like, I am going to cook, I am going to eat, I'm going to watch movies, I'm going to laugh. Like I just need to just really disconnect. And so I one thing I would say is that's a perpetual issue of mine is I love people so much that I continuously pour out and sometimes I forget to sit and rejuvenate. And usually my spiritual practices I've been meditating every Monday through Friday. I meditate for at least 10, 12 minutes, at most 30 minutes of just every day, Monday through Friday, just taking time and meditating. And I do that with my cousin. He's a doctor and he's also like the spiritual guru guy. His name is AZA. He hosts these meditations where people could just come in whenever they want on whatever day, and he just offers meditation. And so I found that to be helpful as far as discipline is concerned, and as far as just kind of refocusing and setting intentions.
I love that you're doing it with holding the accountability with somebody else. And like you mentioned, the healing and the therapy, and you mentioned coming from church, right? So the sense of community, especially now the COVID, and we are physically social distancing, and we're not able to connect with the folks in the way we're used to. What are you discovering about the connection or human relationship? Have you had any aha during this time?
Ah, well, I started calling it physical distancing because I feel like we are socializing times 10 now because this is all that we have. And I think people are realizing how much they need one another and how much they need to like connect with people. So I know a few people, three groups of people yesterday contacted me to hang out because they're like, we're finally out, let's hang out. And I said no to all of them actually, because I actually needed to conserve my energy to get some work done. What I discovered about myself is that I actually like being at home. I love being at home. And people were surprised because I'm always ripping and running, ripping and running. And this gave me permission to sit. I can still hold space for people, but I still get to sit. And when I close my laptop, I'm done, you know? And so I discovered that I like solitude and I need solitude. But what I noticed about other people is that they're realizing how much they need one another. I think the protests that are happening is beautiful. And I think there's like layers to that protest. I think it's like we get to be around people, one, we get to be around people for this cause too. And whether COVID or not, we don't care because this cause of human life is so much more important. And we realize how much more important human life is because we lost so much of it and the lack of connection with people. That's what we see with this. Like it's like a world pandemic, but now it's like a world outcry on behalf of the people that we lost. And George Floyd was the one that really caught people's attention. But let's not forget about Breonna Taylor and Armada Avery. So seeing these things happening as well. I think also there's a lot of feels that are coming out too, as far as the way people really feel about one another, that I think is important. And some of it is not so good. But I think this time of rest also allows for that to be seen so people can actually say, oh my gosh, I have the privilege of operating in the world this way and never having to worry about the way you have to operate in the world unless I see it on the news and it just all seems negative. But now I'm starting to realize there's this whole other world that other people are dealing with. It's like literally the tales of two cities. Like it's like we are here and you are here, and it's totally different experiences. And I think COVID also allowed for that to be seen without the extra distractions of running around all the time.
For sure. I love that when you mentioned about the importance of humanity.
Absolutely. I think humanity is so important. One thing I say is I love humans, but sometimes I don't like them. Because I love them so much, but sometimes we can be so disappointing because there's just so much pain that people have. And depending on the power and privilege that they are given, the way that they exercise that pain is just very damaging to other people. One of the sermons that I heard this morning was like racism is a heart issue and it's manifested through these systems that continue racism, but it's a heart issue and we have to deal with the heart of people because you can always modify behavior, but if that heart of the person doesn't change, that behavior will always go back to its original intent, which is to hurt somebody else because there's some belief system that's happening here that's interacting with the heart problems, and then it's coming out in this very painful way towards groups of people. When we say hurt people, it makes me wonder like why are we hurting each other so much? What pain are you going through that you're not even aware of? So it's a lot of thoughts that I had during COVID about just human nature, about spirituality, just about all of it.
For sure, COVID 19 definitely have given us a time to sit with uncomfortable feelings, sit with ourselves, which most people, including myself, are not really comfortable with.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, this is something that's absolutely devastating, and I hope we never go through this again. But if we do, I hope that the things that we learn from this time we can carry over to make it the best that it can be next time. And even if not, that we don't forget, that we don't easily forget and then go back to business as usual.
Mm. You're kind of started answering my next question already, but in your ideal world, what do you want the humanities to look like? What is your ideal world looks like?
I hope I don't tear up. This is where the little Carol and me is like, everybody loves each other. In the ideal world, I think people would be healed, like genuinely healed. And the pains that they experience, they are given the space to process it in the healthiest way with the person that either hurt them or with someone else that they trust so that it doesn't fester and plant seeds of other sorts of pain. I'm going to just put that part out there. In the ideal world, people will acknowledge the differences and acknowledge similarities, embrace people all the same. I don't believe in being colorblind. I think being colorblind is actually very painful and invisible. It makes people invisible because what you're saying is I'm colorblind and I'm only looking at those who lives a life in a way that makes sense to me, and we're just erasing everything that makes them who they are, their culture, their experiences. And so in this ideal world, we'll celebrate that. And I think in this ideal world, we'll actually see similarities. When I study certain cultures, I see similarities in Asia that I see in the continent of Africa. And I know if I were to bring that up to people, they'll be like, no, we're totally different. We're not the same. And I'm like, okay, that's rooted in anti-Blackness. Let's get away from anti-Blackness. Let's get away from that unhealthy part of nationalism, and let's embrace the humanness about it. Yes, each culture is distinct and it's beautiful and is rooted in culture and history, but there's similarities there that is so beautiful. And sitting back and seeing this here and seeing this here, and I'm like, this is similar. Like, this is really similar. And I'm like, if we can look at the similarities as well as the differences and embrace that, our society will be so much better. It'll be colorful and flavorful. It won't be filled with like all this competition. And if it is competition, it'll be fun, like fun competition. But if inferiority and superiority wouldn't be a thing, inferiority and superiority to what? Success will be defined on the person living their best life that is for them. Everyone would have a purpose, everyone would have a mission. And so, whether it's a front man that's on a podium or a front woman that's on a podium, or whether it's someone who's just really good at pulling the strings behind the scenes, everyone feels like they serve some type of purpose and they do it with pride. I am a garbage man because I want to clean up my community, and I do it with pride, and I love doing it. So we don't have people doing jobs just to get by. They're doing what they're doing because they see that they're connected to that. And I think that type of society that's rooted in purpose and inclusion and in acceptance would just thrive. It would just be so beautiful. So that's my ideal society.
I love, love, love that. And I can literally keep hearing you speak all day. The vision you share right now, it's so beautiful. And I'm pretty sure a lot more people would love to experience your magic. So, can you tell people how they can find you, how they can get involved in your event? Maybe that's a post COVID. If you have any, can you share a little bit about how people can find you?
Sure. So I've made Facebook my blog. For some reason, I can't get my blog off the ground because I put all my thoughts on Facebook. So you can find me on Facebook as Gerina Jade. And so that's Gerina space Jade. The Facebook wouldn't allow me to do the accent, but it's Gerina Jade on Facebook. And then on Instagram, it's the same at Gerina Jade on Instagram. I mean, on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram and I'm there. If you are interested in services, you can find me on Psychology Today, or you can go to the website thinkpossiblemft.com. That's thinkpossiblemft.com to request services or Psychology Today. And yeah, those are different ways that you can find me right now. Other things will be possibly coming down the pipeline. And so I will share that on those platforms of ways you can connect with me and find me.
Thank you so much. This is my last question for you today. with all the wisdom and love that you shared up until this point in mind, what is your call to action for the world today?
Ooh, oh, I love actions. My call to action for every person is to sit with your darkest, ugliest, painful part of yourself. Um, to sit with it, to ask it questions. Where did you come from? Why do you do this? What's happening there? And then hugging that part, embracing that part, because that part is a part of you. Um, and allowing it to say, I love you despite these things. I forgive you despite these things, and that I'm going to give you the space to learn and grow. I think when we consistently try to hide these things about ourselves, we try to hide it from ourselves, we try to hide it from other people, that we consistently live this inauthentic life. But in order to really live authentically as people and really trust that people love us for who we are because we are showing up as our full selves, we need to heal and accept those other parts a part of us so that we can actually feel confident in displaying that to the world. And so that is my call to action, people, is to sit with those ugly parts of you and acknowledge it. And I mean, something that I said to people before, and they were like, oh, but you're a therapist. Oh my gosh. I say that my pain, sometimes when I'm really triggered, I have some abusive um attributes that I have to check. And it doesn't make me an evil person. It makes me a person in pain. And so I have to check that to say, why am I being triggered right now? How can I fix this situation so I'm not an abusive person? I don't like saying that people are like, you are abusive. That is not my identity, but I have abusive tendencies that I get to work on. Right. And when I see that in my clients, you get to work on those things. Don't hide that. Don't be ashamed because you're going to be, what is it? Like a slave to your shame instead of being a slave to love. And so that is my call to action.
Love it. Thank you so much for all your wisdom and love that shared today. I'm always in awe of like how articulate you are, and I just really, really appreciate you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. I love the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Whether I see it on the web or whether I see it in person, like what you had at the school, I thought that was great. As far as talking about justice and how do we look at the criminal system and how do we look at how we integrate people back into communities and then how do we work through gender. I think the stuff that you're doing is super dope. So I was honored when you were like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I was like, "Sure, I'll do it."
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Again, thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.